December 7th, 1941, the peaceful world of the Pearl Harbor base explodes early in the morning. A Japanese fleet has dropped 8 bombs on the U.S. military base. This will be what sparked an uproar of debate that fueled the U.S.'s entry into World War II and a controversial diplomacy to force thousands into camps. These events would influence our nation forever.
We were building a small medical unit on the north banks of the harbor, and suddenly we heard a buzzing, and it kept getting larger, bigger and bigger.
Somebody said, we're having a practice attack on Sunday? That's unusual. Looked up about that time, this first plane released a bomb. I said, man, that's the biggest practice bomb I've ever seen.
We didn't know what was happening. The ship was shaking. I had my skippers on, and I said, well, let me go up and see what's happening.
We thought it was our own planes. But the planes got overhead, we looked at the wings, and there was the rising sun.
You could see the big old red ball on the fuselage, and I could see the operator when he moved his lever to release the torpedo.
A Japanese torpedo plane down at port side, pilot, radium, and co-pilot laughing like everything.
We ran outside and seen the adjoining hangar engulfed in smoke and flames. We also then seen all of the aircraft overhead circling with the rising sun insignia. Then we knew what happened.
Pulled myself through with all my padding on to get to the crow's nest, and I'm up there on the lookout, and no guns, no nothing. Ships are burning, planes are flying all over.
They peel off and come down and start bombing, disintegrating our ships. And then we knew we were for real in the war.
In December of 1940, Roosevelt accused Hitler of trying to go on a world conquest. Ruling out negotiations, he decided to take action and matters into his own hand. Noticing that Germany's ally, Italy, was on the brink of invading Ethiopia, Roosevelt saw a war rising, and that could not happen after America's Great Depression. They were just now recovering. America announced a neutrality policy, placing an embargo act on the two nations, keeping weapons and other goods from being transported between the two. America, 1941. Tensions are brewing not just here, but all around the world. As Adolf Hitler continued his invasion into Poland, news inevitably reached the U.S. People wondered, should they join, take down the superpower, or do they stay on the sidelines? After the last war, the Great War, nobody really wanted to go through that again, and so the debate raged on.
Until December 7th of the later year, the Japanese bombed the American military base, Pearl Harbor. The reasoning for this was because the Japanese wanted to take over Southeast Asia, but America was in the way of doing just that. And by bombing our military base, the Japanese hoped that it would leave America devastated and motivate the country to just give up. Of course, America did not budge, and so chaos trailed quickly behind the Japanese anger. 8 bombs were dropped on Hawaii's U.S. military base. At the time, being a mere property of the U.S., it still affected the U.S. greatly.
Pearl Harbor, 1941. It was left in horrific shambles, boats overturned, hundreds lost. What is left of it is not good. As the news spreads, so does the outrage. People, of course, knew that the war was happening, but for it to happen on their own turf, they were obviously really upset. Millions of people joined the push for war. Propaganda sparked, political cartoons, posters. People really wanted this war to happen, more than before. What was a small debate in the grand scheme of things in America swelled so big, so fast, that it needed diplomatic action. And so, the debate raged on. However, to better understand this, we choose to go back to see the pre-effects, the simmering water ready to boil.
However, there were multiple concerns that needed to be addressed. On the peace advocate side, we had no money to go into this war. America was now recovering from the Great Depression. The U.S. was in major debt and certainly didn't see like it had plenty to spare. However, on the other side of the debate, the Americans were still upset over the bombing, so there were some people who were pushing for the United States to join the New World War.
Is that it? Cut!
Let's go! Yeah!
And now we have the other thing to do.
The first matter of business for America's higher-ups. After the Japanese enemies attacked, a fear was instilled in most of the population against Japanese. Hours after Pearl Harbor, the FBI rounded up over 1,000 Japanese citizens. Freezing their assets, the Navy started removing Japanese from the ports. With fear of Japanese from those who weren't, and Japanese being attacked, something had to be done. In creating the Japanese internment camps, DeWitt was a leader of the Western Defense Command, so a lot of people respected him and listened to his ideas on the matter. DeWitt filed a report filled with tons of false propaganda in order to get support from the higher-ups to go through with the concentration camps. Anyone at least 1/16 Japanese were sent, including 17,000 children under the age of 10.
There were 10 camps, and in those, 120,000 people. That's 12,000 people per camp. For size, that's more people than can fit in our local concert stadium. Each camp was like a town with schools, factories, and even post offices. Depending on the location, factories would distribute cabinets, garments, mattresses, even naval ships. Violence was rare, but not undetectable. Prisoners were shipped by train and forced to march 2 miles to camp. On July 27, 1942, during a march, Toshio Kubota and Hiroda Isomura were shot by a sentry who claimed they were trying to escape.
On the 4th of August 1942, a riot broke out in the Santa Anita Assembly Center as a result of overcrowding. The riot peaked to Fred Tamiya being beaten and severely injured. Fearing farther damage, police tear-gassed the crowd. James Ito was killed instantly, and several others were wounded. Harry Uneo was later arrested for Tamiya's attack. Among those injured was Japanese-American Jim Kangasawa, 21, who died of complications 5 days after the fact.
A debate began as to what to do with the Japanese-American population. Still trapped in camps, some wanted to keep them locked up to prevent another war. However, there was a sensible side that said there was no logic in keeping them locked up. Nobody was planning to go to war after such debt.
End of the concentration camps. In March of 1946, the last Japanese internment camp was closed, but only after 2 years after the war had ended. These camps were ended by Gerald Ford, the President of the United States at the time. After the fact of this matter, someone had to pay for the consequences of this failed diplomacy. Congress awarded $20,000 US over 80,000 Japanese Americans each. That's a lot of money.
As the war concluded, the Japanese weren't the only freed. The world was freed from tension and fear. The Jews were freed from the concentration camps in Germany. The diplomatic action for the U.S. to join the war majorly influenced how it ended, and it was the result of a debate sparked by Pearl Harbor, which eventually led to the war ending peacefully.